Patrick Christie's here at Westmonster. I'm joined today by Paul Scully, Tory MP for Sutton and Cheam. Thanks very much for joining me today, Mr. Scully.
Good to see you.
We saw a letter go out to universities across the country yesterday asking for the names of university lecturers who were involved in teachings of Brexit and European affairs, and asked for a copy of their syllabus and their online lectures. But critics have called this an attempt to stifle free thought in academia and even McCarthyism. What do you think about it?
I think it's a fair line of inquiry. Chris Heaton-Harris didn't do it as a whip, he didn't do it as a member of the government, he did it as an individual member of parliament. As far as I understand, it was maybe to research for a book. But frankly, just asking people's names, that means that he's able to engage those people in debate rather than just an anonymous lecturer behind via a vice-chancellor or something like that. And so I think it's good to actually to get to grips with what's going on in our universities, but that's not the same as controlling it by any stretch of the imagination.
You tweeted a picture yesterday, I believe your daughter was at university and there was a pro-Remain leaflet handed out, and do you think there is a bias in British universities and why?
Well, I wouldn't have tweeted the picture if it was just a pro-Remain leaflet hanging about, because that's what, there's always politics in universities. Actually, what my main concern was that was one of her lecturers handed out. She's doing an engineering degree. If she was doing a politics degree, again, I can sort of understand it, but this is just not related. And when Brexit becomes sort of integral to your engineering lectures as well, as I've sort of heard reported back from some, then it's not fair. I don't think it's relevant, and I don't think that students who are paying a good amount for their tuition fees should have to be paying for someone to tell them what to think about an unrelated subject.
So do you think there is maybe a wider spread problem in British universities, and also what can be done about it? Because can we actually end up with a position where maybe there is a kind of state-approved political teaching in universities? Is that where we're going to have to go with it?
Well, I would hope not. I don't think anybody realistically wants to control what's taught in universities. They certainly don't want to control thought. I mean, this is the thing about Chris Heaton-Harris's letter, which prompted me to tweet the picture, was people coming back and saying it was the thought police. Well, almost like actually who's sitting there teaching children and then pushing their views on top of it whilst they are doing that in that subconscious way. So no, we don't need to control it, but actually there's no reason why we can't have a debate about what is taught. Politics is fine, people's views are fine, but let's debate about it in the right context.
Do you think there's scope for some kind of greater control maybe to be rolled out across the lower end of the higher education system, as it were, in secondary schools, when people first maybe start to engage in politics? There's a lot been made of maybe a left-wing bias in schools and things like that. I mean, is that something you would like to see, maybe a greater element of control there with regards to political teaching?
Well, again, I don't think it's necessarily about control, but I do think we need to just remind teachers, school teachers, of their obligations, that they need to be balanced. They need to be non-political, but it's good to actually get children engaged in politics, and so that they actually understand that there are debates to be had on any number of subjects. But again, there's a balance to be had between teaching them the differences, but imposing opinions on them at a young age.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think that a lot of these universities obviously have a lot of funding and things like a lot of EU funding, or is the left-wing bias perceived more political, or do you think it's more financial for some of these universities, do you think?
Well, I think it's a mixture. I mean, universities, obviously, you're going back to adults, teaching adults, so it's different from schools, obviously. But I think there is an institutionalised situation where people are, and there are valid reasons for concern about Brexit for them, in terms of international research, international students and these kind of things, but that's really different from saying, right, let's just halt the democratic mandate that we've had, we'll halt the fact that the Parliament has now voted for Article 50, to invoke Article 50, that we are leaving. Actually, I'd just rather them get on with helping us shape that Brexit through sensible discussions, but there is a sense of institutionalised bias in many ways.
If a university was found to relentlessly be kind of over the top plugging this pro-Remain reversal of Article 50 thing, and maybe had been warned about it and wasn't stopping and was giving no flip side to the coin at all, what should happen then, or what could happen then, do you think?
Well, as I say, I'm not talking about control, I'm not talking about sanctions, but actually one of the key things that students are worried about when they're spending a lot of money on tuition fees through their student loans is they need to remember they are also consumers. So actually, if we can call people out that for this sort of style of teaching and bringing other things in, then actually those adults, young adults, need to be empowered to actually say, hold a sec, this is not what I'm paying the tuition fees for. Please just get on with teaching me my core subject.
And just lastly now, obviously there are maybe some other areas in society who could roll out a similar view that you just had there. Things like licence fee paying with BBC, maybe one, or things like with the arts, maybe. Would you like to see maybe greater balance, I suppose, on some things like with the BBC, or not? Does it not bother you at all?
Well, this is the perennial argument about the BBC, and it's public funded. It's got its balance requirements, but there is again an institutionalised set of people, because I guess a certain set of people are actually attracted to go and work in the BBC, and they tend to be of the left or the centre left, these kind of things, and so I'm always concerned that they balance their reports, and they can always do more, I think, to make that happen.
Brilliant, Paul Scully, thank you very much.